One of the best ways to deal with painful arthritic knees is to build strength in those quadricep muscles, those big muscles in the front of your thighs. That is all well and good, but how do you build strength in those muscles when every exercise you've tried has caused your knee pain to get worse? Squats are commonly thought of as a gold standard for strengthening the quadriceps muscles. However, squats are one of the exercises that place a higher amount of stress through the knees. It is important to say that exercises that put a higher amount of stress through the knee aren't necessarily a bad thing. They're not bad for your knees. It might just be though that at this point of time, your knees or knee might not have the ability to tolerate that level of stress. And by trying to push past it, we might aggravate your pain even further and make it worse. However, if you avoid squats and any other exercise that puts stress through the knee, then you're going to create an environment where your knee loses the ability to tolerate even more stress, so it's more likely to flare up again in the future. What we want to do is find a comfortable starting point with the exercises that you can then gradually increase the demands of the exercises, to gradually expose the knee to ever increasing amounts of stress. So they learn to tolerate those new levels of stress. And then you create these robust, resilient knees that can deal with the demands of everything you throw at it. During a squat, the highest stress position of that squat is when the knees are roughly reaching about that 90-degree mark. And why that's relevant is that a lot of people come in and tell me that they feel relatively comfortable when they're just doing a shallow squat. And it's only when they venture into those slightly deeper motions that they start to experience pain. So if that's the case, what we can do is just stick to a shallow squat. The problem is that this now might not be creating enough force through the quadriceps to actually build strength. What we can do is add some weight to those shallow squats. And now by keeping the knees in that comfortable range of motion, we can actually start to push the muscles to fatigue. And we want to use a weight that's heavy enough that we're starting to reach that muscular fatigue by the end of the repetitions that we're aiming for. If doing these squats with weights makes you nervous, then having a surface behind can act like a bit of a safety net. So if you find that you really struggle towards the end, you've got a safety net that's going to catch you before you move into that painful range of motion. The further forwards that your knees travel over your toes as you're doing a squat, the more stress that it places through your knees. Now, once again, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but if you're in a position where you're not able to tolerate that much stress and it becomes then painful, then we want to look at other options. One of them, we can make use of this TRX. So what we can do is we can then lean back into the squat. So now my shins are staying vertical and my knees are staying directly over my heels rather than directly over my toes. Now that tends to be a much more comfortable position for people to be able to do a squat with much less knee pain. And actually what you can often find is that you can then start exploring deeper squats with a lot less pain than if you were doing it without the TRX and just trying to do it normally. Now, adding weight becomes a little more difficult because now my hands are full, but one option could be to do that with a weighted vest, or you could have a rucksack with some bottles of water in, and then you could do the same exercise, just working within your comfortable range of motion, and then trying to get to the point where your muscles are the thing that reaches fatigue, and that's what limits you, rather than your knee becoming too painful and that being the thing that limits you. The problem with squats is that the minimum weight you can do a squat with is your own body weight. It becomes very difficult and challenging to offload your body weight whilst you're still trying to perform a squat. There are exercises you can do that still challenge the quads enough to strengthen them whilst you're sitting down. So now your legs aren't having to support your own body weight. Knee extensions are a great option. Now they are considered a higher stress exercise for the knee, but because I'm sat down and my body weight isn't going through my leg, I can start with a much lighter weight. So I could use a cable machine and just put the lightest weight on, or this band is about 15 to 35 pounds of resistance, which is much less than my body weight. So it's a much lower starting point, which is one that I'm more likely to be able to tolerate. The other option, which I don't have here, is a leg press machine. That's where you sit back with your feet on a plate and you push the plate away from you, or sometimes you're pushing yourself away from the plate. So again, you can start with a weight that is much lighter than your body weight, which might mean that you're under that threshold where you're no longer getting knee pain, and we can start to challenge the muscles and build the strength in them. The other exercise I like to include in a program for arthritic knees is the Romanian deadlift, or the RDL. So with this motion, it is technically more of a hip hinge exercise or a hip or glute dominant exercise rather than a knee or quad dominant exercise. However, studies have shown that when you're doing the Romanian deadlift, your quads are still active. They are working, and therefore they're going to get a little bit stronger when you're doing the Romanian deadlifts. And the reason I like to use Romanian deadlifts is because as I go into that motion, just like those TRX squats, my shins are staying pretty vertical, my knees are above my heels rather than having drifted over onto my toes. So I'm in a much more comfortable position for my knees. And then I can allow myself to really focus on just building strength and lifting more weight in that comfortable position. And generally everyone's really surprised just how much weight they can do the Romanian deadlifts without experiencing any pain. And the confidence that gives you is really valuable as you move forwards with your strengthening program. In summary, you're going to need to expose the knees to a little bit of what they don't like so that you can build strength in the quads and you can increase the knee's ability to tolerate a little bit more load or stress, a little bit more. And that way you're going to create these robust, resilient knees that are going to have less chance of repeat flare-ups and allow you to be active longer into the future. Equally, we have to recognise that having arthritic knees is going to make finding your starting point a little bit more tricky. And if you are struggling to find a good, suitable starting exercise, then I want to introduce you to the Never Too Old to Lift ebook. This is going to help guide you through the process of building your own strengthening program around your current ability level and any conditions that you might have. And it will teach you how to progress the exercises at the suitable stages. So if you're interested, just look for the link in the description to download that ebook for free.